Imagine being a physician 250 years ago. You have a patient sitting in front of you, and the patient has come with all the possible combinations of symptoms and diseases to you. You obviously know what the patient is suffering from because we've covered it exceptionally well in a last lecture of knowledge of disease. Now what? Are you going to select a medicine to help cure the patient? If yes, how is it going to be? From A, B, and C. Are you going to select it by tradition? Are you going to select it because it's your favorite remedy? Or are you going to do some trial and error method and depend purely on luck? The answer to that question changed the history of medicine, and that's exactly what we are exploring today. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Organon classroom with Dr. Gazala. Here we are with episode 4 of our Hughes series, Lecture 5 Knowledge of Medicines. In this lecture, Richard Hughes talks exclusively about the second aspect that we cover in our ground plan of Organon, the knowledge of medicine. Let's start with the lecture for today. Before we go ahead and understand that why we must have knowledge of medicines, we must first know what exactly is this medicine. Hahnemann has given us a remarkable definition in his work Fragmentari Viribus in 1805. The Latin passage that you see in the textbook right in front of you on this slide means nothing but the definition of medicine. And it is that a medicine is a substance with the power to alter health into sickness and therefore sickness into health. Right? So, if it is taken by a healthy individual, it produces symptoms, and those very symptoms become our guide in selecting that particular medicine for a patient suffering from a similar illness. Does this ring a bell with you guys? This simple definition becomes the foundation of drug proving, the materia medica, and ultimately the law of similars. It tells us that before a medicine can cure, we must first know what it is capable of producing. So it is nothing but understanding the curative power of that substance or that drug that we call as medicine. All right. Now that we know what is medicine, the next question is going to be what that medicine can do. मतलब what is curative in that medicine. ठीक है, वो फाइंड आउट करने के लिए अपने पास दो अप्रोचेस है. एक है एम्पेरिकल और चांस मेथड, सेकंड है रैशनल एंड साइंटिफिक मेथड. ऑलराइट, तो पहले वाला जो है एम्पेरिकल एंड चांस मेथड, उसमें इट वाज डिस्कवर्ड बाय कॉमन मैन और ब्रूट चांस. अब कॉमन मैन ऐसे क्यों कहा गया है? बिकॉज इसके लिए कोई एक्सपर्टीज की जरूरत नहीं थी कि आप मेडिकल के बंदे हो, ओनली देन यू आर गोइंग टू prove of some drug or do some work for it and then come with a conclusion or something of that sort. Not at all, because ये इतने सालों से चल रही है, ट्रेडिशन टाइप जैसे हो जाता है, और इतने सालों से चल रही है तो आगे भी यही चलेगी. ठीक है, तो उसके लिए देवर कॉमन मेडिसिन लाइक द सिंकोना bark for ache, burnt sponge for goiter, arnica for falls and strains, graphitis for tetter. What is this tetter? ये ना प्री मॉडर्न मेडिकल टर्म है. ठीक है, फॉर इची स्केली ब्लिस्टर लाइक स्किन eruptions. ठीक है, तो जो स्किन एलिमेंट्स होते थे डर्मेट रिलेटेड, उसके लिए ग्राफाइटिस, सल्फर फॉर इच एंड ऑल ऑफ इट. नाउ इफ यू विल सी ऑल दिस मेडिसिन आर इवन यूज्ड होम्योपैथिकली. बट वो होम्योपैथिकली क्यों यूज हो रही है? क्योंकि आगे चल के ये प्रूव हुई है ना. व्हेन हैनेमैन वाज डूइंग क्यूलेंस मटेरिया मेडिका, उसको तब लगा ना कि भाई ये ऐसे बस लिखा हुआ है कि सिंकोना bark is going to cure up malarial egg, तो why does he want to believe it straight away? वहां से फिर जो रिफॉर्म स्टार्ट हुआ ended up into the rational and the scientific approach. ठीक है, हम लोग वहां भी आ रहे हैं, but this is a preview for it. Okay, तो ये medicines were used पहले से कि ये है तो ऐसा condition, this for this for this. Alright, तो उसको कहते हैं empirical या by chance method से. सेकेंड है रैशनल और द साइंटिफिक मेथड. ठीक है, अब ये जो है इट वाज डेड्यूस्ड वाया द पैथोजेनेटिक इफेक्ट like borax in epilepsy, alumina in locomotor ataxia, and so on and so forth. अब पैथोजेनेटिक इफेक्ट्स मतलब हम लोग जब उसको कहते हैं कि होम्योपैथिकली प्रूवन. ठीक है, नाउ व्हेन वी से होम्योपैथिकली प्रूवन तो अपना कॉन्सेप्ट ही ड्रग प्रूविंग का अलग हो जाता है. right? We are going to come towards it in our further slides, but for now we have to understand about these two approaches, which are empirical and rational. All right, now that we know that Hahnemann had wanted a scientific way of understanding our medicines, naturally the next question would arise, why not test these medicines on animals? ठीक है, now if you go to see, we've been cruelty free since the start. अभी अपने counterparts जाके अभी they give up on the provings and all, जो otherwise usually guinea pigs वगैरह and monkeys और बहुत सारे अदर एनिमल्स पे होती थी, अब जाके वो लोग क्रुएल्टी फ्री हो रहे हैं, बट हम पहले से ही ऐसे थे, क्यों? बिकॉज इनिशियली हैनेमन हैड रिजेक्टेड दिस आइडिया. ही यूज्ड द लैटिन फ्रेज जो ब्रैकेट में आपको दिख रहा है, कॉर्पस वाइल, which literally means a worthless body or a body of little value for experimentation. ठीक है, अब ऑब्वियस सी बात है, मेडिसिन अगर तुम इंसान को दे रहे हो तो ऑब्वियसली तुम वो मेडिसिन के जो चेंजेस हो गए, वो मेडिसिन का काम कर सकती है. यू आर गोइंग टू टेस्ट दैट ऑन अ इंसान ओनली, राइट? आप एक एनिमल पे टेस्ट कर रहे हो एंड देन यू आर गिविंग द सेम मेडिसिन टू अ ह्यूमन बीइंग. डू यू थिंक दैट मेडिसिन इज गोइंग टू elicit the same changes? Here Hahnemann says that the bodies of animals, he believed that the results obtained from animals could not be reliably applied to humans. Exactly what we just told. As this slide shows right in front of you, different animals react very differently to the same substances. ठीक है, अभी इसको थोड़ा ध्यान से देखो. This is for your mind to work. Okay, everything you're not going to get straight lines. How and where this match the following goes. ठीक है, so the pigs, the swines, they can swallow large amounts of nux vomica without any harm. Horses were able to eat dried aconite and rabbits tolerated belladonna. Yet the same substances would be poisonous to dogs, wolves, and cats. These inconsistent reactions made Hahnemann conclude that animal experiments could not accurately predict the action of medicine in human beings. Therefore, he established a new principle. To know the true action of medicine, it must be proved on healthy human volunteers. अब volunteers क्यों? हम लोग पकड़ पकड़ के तो किसी को you cannot be giving medicine and saying नहीं 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 आपको proof करना है, आपको proof करना है. It doesn't happen that way. Only if that person is volunteering, उसको खुद से will है कि नहीं वो drug proving में they are going to give some contribution, हम तभी उसको proving में लेते हैं. Even now in your college days when you are in the drug proving team and all of it, you are made to sign a lot of consent forms. Why those consents? Because you are giving that amount of time of yourself, okay, and your body for something which is homeopathically driven. ठीक है, आपको कोई force नहीं कर रहा है कि नहीं आपको ही करना ही है, otherwise you won't be learning something or you won't be appearing for any exam or whatsoever. ये consent वाली बात होती है, ठीक है, that's why consent is important. All right, तो यहाँ पे जब volunteers आते हैं तो वहाँ we give them certain medicines to elicit their curative action. So the true action of medicine होगा वो human being पे ही होगा. Although Hahnemann later has acknowledged that animal experiments may have some subsidiary value, he maintained that human drug proving remains the gold standard for homeopathic materia medica. ठीक है, हम लोग हमेशा देखो याद करो, इवन इन प्रीवियस लेक्चर्स वी स्पोकन अबाउट इट, जब भी कंपैरिजन होता है ना, जब भी कोई एक स्टडी होती है वो सिमिलर काइंड में होती है. ठीक है, इफ टुडे आई एम गोइंग टू स्टडी समथिंग अबाउट द स्टार्स, ऑलराइट, I will not derive conclusions then for something which is on the earth. That will have to be somewhere up in the space only, जो मेरा conclusion होगा. ठीक है, तो as simple as that, the concept is कि मटीरिया मेडिका की जो प्रूविंग्स है, मटीरिया मेडिका का जो गोल्ड स्टैंडर्ड है वो सिर्फ ह्यूमन ड्रग प्रूविंग पे ही बेस्ड है. ऑलराइट, अभी ये स्लाइड को देख के यू मे रेज अ क्वेश्चन कि अगर Hahnemann has rejected only the animal experiments, then why on earth are we discussing them now? Why is it included in this chapter? The answer to this is later researchers demonstrated that animal experiments can be useful but for a different purpose. ठीक है, अब Hahnemann is not really telling this. The other researchers which came in through, like Wegener, Eugene Curie, Sir Lauder Brunton, Scroff, ये सारे जो लोग हैं, ठीक है, इन्होंने एनिमल्स के ऊपर पैथोलॉजिकल इफेक्ट्स ऑफ मेडिसिन को देखा है. ठीक है, तो उसका मतलब क्या है कि अभी फॉर एग्जांपल आप पहले ये देख लो, द phosphorus as given by Wagner. Okay, it has shown the effect of stomach and liver. Atropia and digitalis was studied for the action on the heart, while Bryonia, Drosera, aconite help explain changes in the lungs and nervous system. Now, these studies deepen our understanding of how drugs affect organs and tissues. However, they could not reveal the complete symptom picture experienced by the human being. Right? अपने में जब हम केस टेकिंग कर रहे हैं, जब हमको जानना है कि हाउ दैट पर्सन इज, एंड इवन इन लास्ट लेक्चर वी हैव गिवन सो मच ऑफ इम्पोर्टेंस नॉलेज ऑफ डिजीज में टू द सब्जेक्टिव सिम्टम्स, राइट, उससे ही पता चलता है कि वो एक्चुअली इंसान क्या है। और जो पैथोलॉजिकल और जो स्ट्रक्चरल चेंजेस होते हैं, दे आर तो द एंड प्रोडक्ट्स ऑलमोस्ट, द बाय प्रोडक्ट्स ऑफ द डिजीज होते हैं, दे आर नॉट डिफाइनिंग द पर्सन इन पर्टिकुलर, right? We always keep physical generals over physical particulars while prescribing homeopathically, right? तो ये सारे experiments and all ठीक है, the animals eventually suffered, तो ये completely cruelty free नहीं हुआ, ठीक है। बट हैनेमन ने जो आगे पहले मेंटेन किया था पिछली स्लाइड में, he maintains even now that animal experiments may be valuable for understanding certain pathology and organ changes, but the drug provings on healthy human beings remain essential for the construction of homeopathic materia medica and selecting the simillimum. Each has its own place but they serve different purposes, right? Again जो अपनी बात है, अगर आपको कोई चीज स्टडी करनी है तो यू आर स्टडिंग इन द सिमिलर काइंड, ठीक है। अगर आप दो डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ चीजें ले रहे हो, थिंग्स यू आर कंसिडरिंग, एंड देन यू वांट टू कम टू वन सिंगल कंक्लूजन, दैट्स नॉट गोइंग टू एवर हैपन. Okay, so that is why the mention of the animal experiments and pathology, but the basis remains clear that we need our provings on healthy human beings because we are constructing a materia medica solely for human beings. All right, so now before Hahnemann developed the systematic drug proving method, physician also learned about medicines by observing the sick and the poisoned. The first source was toxicology. When a person was accidentally poisoned, तो physicians क्या करते थे? Physicians carefully symptoms को record करते थे, और जहाँ पे cases fatal होते थे, मतलब death sure and short है, वहाँ पे even the postmortem changes. These records gave valuable information about the action of powerful drugs. However, this method was limited because it only applied to a small number of poisonous substances and produced only severe and often life-threatening symptoms. Right? So, जैसे life threatening drugs होते हैं, वो तो आप ऐसे किसी को भी देख के नहीं बोल सकते हो कि ये लो आपको खाना है, आपको मरना है, so that we study. राइट, तो जो एक्सीडेंटल पॉइजनिंग होती थी वो ही स्टडी की जाती थी। अब एक्सीडेंटल पॉइजनिंग बिकॉज वो रेयरली ऐसे होती है, इट इज नॉट समथिंग विच इज कॉमन, इसीलिए उसको एक्सीडेंटल कहते हैं, राइट। सेकेंड मेथड इज ओवरडोजिंग. Some physicians administered very large doses of medicines to sick patients and observed the effects. Hahnemann himself initially considered that these observations were useful. Massive doses dena, ठीक है? However, after developing the theory of dynamization around 1824, he realized that such massive doses produced artificial disturbances rather than the true medicinal picture. है ना, हम लोग अभी भी वी नेवर गिव a large dose to a patient. हमारा जो डोज होता है, the best dose is the infinitesimal dose, मतलब सबसे मिनिमल डोज, राइट। तो जब मैसिव डोज देते हैं तो यू डोंट रियलाइज इफ दैट इज एक्चुअली द ड्रग पिक्चर और दैट इज जस्ट द आर्टिफिशियल डिजीज, दैट मीन्स द disease caused by that drug in that person taking over the body, right? तो प्रॉपर सिम्टम्स पकड़ के नहीं आएंगे वेयर यू कुड ऑब्जर्व एंड मेक योर ओन record. Therefore, Hahnemann moved away from toxicology and overdosing and established a safer and more scientific method of proving medicines on healthy human volunteers using carefully controlled doses. This became the foundation of homeopathic materia medica. As of now, we know that Hahnemann has supported द व्यू ऑफ ड्रग प्रूविंग, है ना, उसको अपने को हेल्दी ह्यूमन वॉलंटियर्स पे करना है, सो दैट वी कैन स्टडी द प्रॉपर पिक्चर एंड द प्रॉपर यूसेज ऑफ द ड्रग, ओके, एंड दिस disease which it can actually cure, right? But Hahnemann was not the first to think of this. Hahnemann के पहले एक स्विस फिजिशियन रह चुके हैं जिनका नाम है Albert von Haller. Okay, he had also suggested it during his time that the true effects of a medicine should be studied on a healthy person. Hahnemann did take this idea and transformed it into a systematic scientific method, जिसको हम drug proving बोलते हैं. A proving is the careful administration of a medicine to a healthy volunteer, followed by meticulous observation and recording of every change that it produces. बट यहाँ पे भी एक कैच है, there's a rule that only those symptoms caused by the medicine should be recorded. Any symptom arising from the person's own health, lifestyle or existing illness must be excluded. इसीलिए जो लोग प्रूविंग में जाते हैं ना, उसके पहले उनका एक डिटेल केस लिया जाता है इन ऑल एस्पेक्ट्स, ठीक है, फिर उसके बाद में जो मेडिसिन रिलेटेड सिम्टम्स आते हैं, ऑल्टरेशन आते हैं, चेंजेस आते हैं, उसको हम रिकॉर्ड करते हैं, और तभी ओके और वो करने के लिए यू नीड these observation skills, ठीक है, so there are dedicated people who do this proving only, ओके वो सिर्फ प्रूविंग्स के लिए होते हैं, तो उनको एक आइडिया होता है, उनको समझ होती है, उनको they have this vision, okay, where they know the difference between the person's symptoms and the drug symptom. Okay, so in short, the medicine must become the only one factor which is influencing the prover. Only then can we discover its pure effects, and those pure effects become the foundation of materia medica. ठीक है, now for example अगर कोई prover है and he is under proving and all, ठीक है, तो and एक दिन he happens to eat very spicy food or something, you know, which is not usual for him, ओके और उसकी प्रूविंग भी चल रही है, द ड्यूरेशन इज स्टिल ऑन, और काफी टाइम से देयर इज नो मेडिसिन डोज और समथिंग व्हिच इज आल्सो गिवन टू हिम, और ऐसे कंडीशन में इफ द पेशेंट इज डेवलपिंग डायरिया, गैस्ट्रोएंटराइटिस या ऐसा कुछ जीआई इशू, हार्ट बर्न, इंडाइजेशन, रेट्रोस्टर्नल बर्निंग, ऐसे कुछ भी कोई भी वन ऑफ द जीआई सिम्टम्स, सो दैट सिम्टम इज नॉट नेसेसरीली गोइंग टू बी अ ड्रग सिम्टम, ठीक है, फिर उसका रिकॉर्ड स्टडी किया जाएगा, और फिर उसको अगर रिसेंटली ऐसे कोई यू नो ड्रग नहीं दी गई है एंड नो डोज बीन गिवन टू हिम, और तो ये उसका थोड़ा बहुत केस लेकर वी विल कम टू नो कि ये ठीक है, ही हैड ईटन व्हाटएवर स्पाइसी और एक्स्ट्रा ऑयली और यू नो sumptuous मील अर्लियर, तो उसका रिजल्ट ही हो सकता है, ठीक है, तो अपने को ऐसे रूल आउट करना है और सिर्फ डिजीज सिम्टम्स को ही लेना है. अब ये जो है आपके सामने, ये है एक टाइमलाइन, ठीक है, किस चीज की टाइमलाइन है, ये टाइमलाइन है कि हाउ हैनेमन्स मेथड ऑफ ड्रग प्रूविंग हैज इवॉल्व्ड ओवर टाइम, ठीक है, तो 1805 से लेके 1835 टू 39 तक क्या चेंजेस हुए हैं एंड हाउ इट हैज बीन कंटिन्यूअसली रिफाइंड ओवर दीज 35 years, ये उस स्लाइड है, ये उस बारे में बात करने वाला है. सो इन 1805 हैनेमन, ऑल ऑफ अस नो, पब्लिश्ड फ्रेगमेंटा डी वेरिबिस, और यहाँ पे अपने को मेडिसिन का डेफिनेशन मिला, राइट, ही पब्लिश्ड in 1811 and 1816 also he published the other book, ठीक है, रेने अर्जन मिटेल हेयर, अब तुम उसको प्रोनाउंस करो, स्पेलिंग बराबर लिखना, ऑलराइट, सो इसकी सेकंड वॉल्यूम हुई थी, which where many of the disciples had also contributed to the provings and it made materia medica much more richer, right? फिर मेजर टर्निंग पॉइंट वाज इन 1824, नीचे में दिया है सेकंड, 1824 when Hahnemann developed the theory of dynamization, right? This changed the way provings were conducted. Instead of using large doses, he gradually shifted to smaller and potentized doses, okay, and then beginning around 1826, ये था जब ट्रांजिशन हुआ टू स्मॉल डोजेस, the first triturations were done 1 to 100 में and all of it together, right? 1833 आते आते the fifth edition of Organon, he recommended that the 30th potency as a standard for provings, ठीक है, fifth edition आते आते he was recommending 30th dilution as the standard potency. And finally in 1835 to 39, the second edition of the chronic disease reflected years of accumulated experience and refinement. This timeline teaches us an important lesson, guys. And what is that? It is that Hahnemann never stopped improving his method. Okay, he was under improvisation always. His Materia Medica evolved through careful observation, repeated verification, and rich and scientific refinement. Okay, and not by some rigid dogma, as in सिर्फ बस एक बार प्रूफ कर दिया तो उसको रख देते, वैसा नहीं था. The medicines, our medicines have been continuously reviewed and verified by a master himself. ठीक है, इसीलिए हमको भी when we are seeing something or when we have a chance to get some drug proving done and all of it and to participate into it, we must do that even if it's for a drug which is already existing. You know why? Because you see your live. Okay, and that becomes an important and a very memorable thing of your life. वो drug आप भूल ही नहीं सकते हो. You know firsthand what it is to feel like having an artificial disease and what it is to feel like having a natural disease, and then you become a better physician yourself because your observation skills improve. ठीक है. One of the biggest developments in homeopathy was Hahnemann's introduction of dynamization or potentization. This raised an important question: does increasing dilution reduce a medicine's action or can it actually enhance it? अब ये जो क्वेश्चन है, ये डिबेट, इट्स इवन एग्जिस्टेंट टिल डेट, और इसी के ऊपर लेकर ही पीपल ट्राई एंड डिग्रेड एंड डिफेम यू. ठीक है, बहुत सारी चीजें बोल रही है, वाटर मेमोरी जैसा कुछ नहीं होता, एंड जो चीज की मेडिसिन कुछ सब्सटेंस ही नहीं है, हाउ इज इट गोइंग टू एक्ट एंड ऑल ऑफ इट टुगेदर. ठीक है, सो हियर वी आर गोइंग टू आंसर अ लॉट नंबर ऑफ क्वेश्चंस. So listen carefully. Hahnemann observed that this was not true for every substance. When medicines like arsenic, even after repeated dilution and attenuation, the pathogenetic power was not destroyed. On the other hand, substances like common salt, which are almost inert in their crude form, began to show clear medicinal effects after potentization. However, this idea was debated because some Austrian provers reported that lower dilutions produced a greater number of symptoms than very high potencies. Similarly, Dr. Konrad Wesselhoff in 1868 found that iris versicolor tincture, okay, mainly caused local effects, whereas the 20th dilution of the same produced more general and systemic symptoms. अभी इम्पोर्टेंट टेक अवे क्या है इतना सभी ऐसे देखने और पढ़ने के लिए, कि दैट Hahnemann's theory of dynamization, it encouraged physicians to look beyond the crude dosage, okay, and to study the quality of a medicine's action. This debate ultimately, it helped refine the science of drug proving and understanding of potency, means the dosage, in homeopathy. Okay. अभी हम कुछ इंटरेस्टिंग देखने वाले हैं which is very important for us for both case taking and case analysis, and obviously for recording the symptoms once it's improving. So once Hahnemann had, he had collected symptoms from drug provings, he had faced another challenge. And what was that challenge? How should all these symptoms be organized? He came up with a solution of what we call it as Hahnemann's schema. ठीक है, अब ये schema में क्या होता है? Instead of recording symptoms in the order that they appeared, ठीक है, chronologically appear होने की बजाय, Hahnemann arranged them anatomically, starting with the head, then the extremities, then the generalities, sleep, fever, and finally the mind. Okay, this made it much easier for physicians to locate the symptoms while consulting the Materia Medica. However, this method that Hahnemann gave, it also had a limitation. By separating symptoms into different sections, the original sequence in which they appeared during the proving was lost. So the Latin term digesta membra, okay, which means only scattered parts, came up, and in other words the symptoms became scattered, losing their natural clinical connection and chronology. So Hahnemann's schema, though it greatly improved the organization of but it was at the cost of separating the symptoms from the order in which they appeared. okay, and in the order which they were actually experienced. So उसका connection नहीं हुआ. This is why modern homeopaths often study both the schema and the original proving records to get a complete picture of the remedy. राइट. तो कोई चीज रिमेम्बर करनी है या वी नो कि ओके ये पॉइंट्स इस मेडिसिन में आने वाला है, सो दैट टाइम वी डू दिस, वी डिस्ट्रीब्यूट द सिम्टम्स एनाटॉमिकली, इट्स स्टिल टेकन ओवर. बट व्हेन यू वांट टू स्टडी दैट मेडिसिन, ओके, द ड्रग पिक्चर ऑफ इट, तो यू विल नीड टू नो कि वो कनेक्टिंग सिम्टम्स क्या रहे हैं, irrespective of the order in which they appeared. Okay, अरे, irrespective of the part in which they appeared, order is more important. ठीक है. तो अभी हम लोग क्या करते हैं, एज मॉडर्न होम्योपैथ्स वी स्टडी बोथ, वी स्टडी द हैनेमन स्कीमा एज वेल, एंड आल्सो वी स्टडी द ओरिजिनल प्रूविंग रिकॉर्ड्स, जिसमें सारे सिम्टम्स जैसे जैसे अपीयर हुए हैं वो बताए गए हैं. ओके. As we just discussed, Hahnemann's schema made the easy to organize, है ना. However, it also attracted a lot of criticism. और सबसे बड़ा critique इसमें रहा है डॉक्टर डजिन का. Okay, and what did he say? That he compared the schema to a very strange family portrait. Okay, the portrait that you see, the image that you see in front of you on the slide, it's an artist painting all the eyes together in one corner. Okay, it's a family portrait. Okay, all the noses of the family members in the center and all the ears in another corner. Okay, each feature is present, but you can no longer recognize the person as a whole. All right, he argued that the same thing happens in when symptoms are separated under different anatomical headings. The relationship and the sequence between the symptoms are lost, while making it difficult to appreciate the complete remedy picture. ओके. तो जैसे कि हमने लास्ट स्लाइड में कहा कि कैसे इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट फॉर अस टू इवन नो द कनेक्टिंग सिम्टम्स एंड द सीक्वेंस ऑफ दोज सिम्टम्स. व्हाई? बिकॉज ऐसा ये जो क्रिटिसिज्म है ना, दिस कम्स वेरी नेचुरली एंड दिस इज स्पेशली रेलिवेंट फॉर स्टूडेंट्स लाइक अस. व्हाई? बिकॉज स्टडिंग रेमेडीज एज डिस्कनेक्टेड सिम्टम्स कैन बी कंफ्यूजिंग एंड डिस्करेजिंग, right? So, nevertheless, Hahnemann's schema remains extremely useful for quick reference. The best approach is to use the schema for locating symptoms, but always when you have to study, you always study the original proving and the remedy as a whole, so that you understand that personality, the drug picture of that particular drug in question. Okay. Now that we know the Hahnemann schema and the criticism that it received, one may ask a question: if at all there was so much of an issue with the schema, why did Hahnemann even use it at all? The answer lies in the purpose of homeopathy. He used it to find the similimum. Okay, Hahnemann, dekho, he never intended us to memorize remedies as complete portraits, okay, before seeing the patient. Instead, he followed on a posteriori approach. Now, what is a posteriori? It means reasoning from observation and experience. Okay, priori. Priori दिख रहा है अपने को? Posteriori. Okay, say it well, write the spelling correctly. Okay, तो उसका मतलब क्या होता है? Reasoning from observation and experience and not from assumptions. So first we, what do? We collect the patient symptoms. जो भी पेशेंट का प्रोफाइल हो, जो आपको लेफ्ट में दिख रहा है, हेडेक हो गया, फीवर हो गया, थर्स्ट, एंजाइटी, रेस्टलेसनेस एंड मेनी अदर्स. Then we compare these individual symptoms with the symptoms recorded in the MM. Okay, right side पे अपना MM है. The remedy that covers the greatest number of the characteristic symptoms is selected as the similimum. Okay. However, here there is a caution, okay, that we need to follow, that if we rely only on mechanical symptom matching, he match the following karna A to A, B to B, C to C, D to D, we may lose the original proving narrative and the true remedy picture. That is why in 1842, all right, 1842, the Austrian Society recommended returning to the original daily proving records. So, though now the schema becomes a valuable tool in seeking the similimum, but the physician's judgment is what ultimately identifies the true similimum. ठीक है, तो अगर ये सिर्फ मैच करना है आपको, मिक्स एंड मैच करके, you are going to get a set of remedies. जब ये मैकेनिकल मैचिंग हो जाएगा, वो सेट ऑफ रेमेडीज में विच इज गोइंग टू बी द सिमिलम, यू विल बी डायरेक्टेड टुवर्ड्स अ सेट ऑफ रेमेडीज, नॉट वन सिंगल रेमेडी. ओके अब उसमें वो सेट ऑफ रेमेडीज में से वो 4 रेमेडीज सपोज आपके पास आई है, वो 4 में से विच यू थिंक इज द मोस्ट क्लोजेस्ट, द मोस्ट सिमिलर to that patient in that particular case is what will be dependent, okay, on your judgment as a physician. Okay, how well you know the provings and how well you know the and how well you have known the patient as a person. All right. अब देखो, the did not stop evolving with Hahnemann. ठीक है, over time different authors developed new ways of presenting the growing body of proving data. Broadly, this evolution can be understood into 3 generations. Okay, first generation focused on practical manuals. Authors like Lippe and Herring condensed the Materia Medica into handy reference books for busy practitioners. While they were practical, they often omitted the original context and the sequence of symptoms. Second generation were represented by Jar, Noack, and Trinks. They produced compendiums. What are those? These are more comprehensive digest kind of a thing, bringing together the knowledge from earlier MMs in an organized form. Okay. Finally, the third generation was led by Dr. Allen, whose encyclopedias of pure became an extensive index of provings. Okay, it preserved Hahnemann's anatomical schema and also it gathered an enormous amount of information, making it invaluable for reference. So while the presentation of guys has changed over time, the foundation has remained the same. Careful observation while doing the drug provings on healthy human beings and forming the scientific basis of homeopathic prescribing. By the late 19th century, there was a growing realization that the materia medica needed to be revised and strengthened. ठीक है? Many symptoms had been copied repeatedly and some lacked proper proving evidence, and the original records were becoming difficult to trace. So, to address this, okay, in 1884, the British Homeopathic Society and the American Institute of Homeopathy, they formed a joint committee to reconstruct the Materia Medica, and their work was completed in 1891 as the Cyclopedia of Drug Pathogenesis. Their objective was threefold. First, they collected only genuinely proving materials, tracing every symptom back to its original source. Second, they excluded purely clinical or cured symptoms that lacked sufficient proving evidence. Samjha? Third, they presented the symptoms in a narrative form, preserving the exact order in which the drug effects developed during the proving. Okay, तो इसमें क्या हो रहा है, genuine proving material भी हो गया, right? Secondly, purely clinical और cured symptoms जो होते हैं which did not really have sufficient proving evidence, उसको exclude कर दिया completely. Third, एक narrative form present किया of the symptoms that were coming up in the province. तो उसके साथ क्या हुआ, एक connecting connection भी हो गया, एक sequencing भी हो गई, right? तो effects जो हुए हैं drug proving develop, that was easier to understand and to remember. So this reconstruction has marked a return of Hahnemann's original scientific spirit, that emphasizing on accuracy, authenticity, and careful observation. Right? So it reminded homeopaths that a reliable must always be built on verified proving evidence and not merely on tradition or repetition. Okay? As we conclude this journey, we arrive at a point where pharmacology will meet pathology. Okay, on one side, we have pathology, which tells us how disease is going to manifest on your left hand side in the patient. Okay, and on the other side, we've got pharmacodynamics, which will tell us how medicine will act on the human body. ठीक है? So, the Cyclopedia of Drug Pathogenesis, जो हम लोग ने पिछली slide में पढ़ा, it serves as a bridge between these two. It provides the raw proving data, but the data needs proper interpretation and systematic study before it can be applied into clinical practice. ठीक है, ये कितना भी fool proof क्यों ना हो, eventually आपको आपका दिमाग लगाना है. ठीक है, because you are not going to accept anything in science blindly. All right, so This is why experienced teachers recommended additional resources such as Hempel's lectures, Bird's physiological and other explanatory tests. They help us understand not just what symptoms as medicine produces, but also why it produces them. As the quotation at the bottom beautifully says, that the pathogenetic records are a mighty maze, yet not without a plan. At first, may seem like a maze or scattered symptoms, but with the guidance of Organon, pathology, and careful study, those scattered symptoms come together into a meaningful picture, enabling us to confidently select the simillimum for our patient. All right? With this, we conclude our lecture for Knowledge of Medicines by Richard Hughes in our Hughes series. And here is our exclusive handout for you guys for everything at a glance, mainly for your last moment revisions. It is available on Instagram at the Organon Classroom. If you find the content relatable and good enough for you, please do subscribe to the channel, The Organon Classroom with Dr. Ghazala. Like and share as well. Okay. Next lecture is going to be episode 5 for Hughes series, lecture 6 in the book, which is Similia Similibus. Happy learning to you all. Learn well, have fun. Thank you so much.